Hello and welcome to Telesur English. I am Estefania Bravo in Quito, Ecuador, and this is from the south. Ecuadorian President Lenín Moreno announced a number of new economic measures recently that will allegedly help combat the mounting crisis caused by COVID-19. Let's have a look.
The Ecuadorian government has proposed new economic measures to face the health crisis caused by the novel coronavirus. Among them is the renegotiation of Ecuador's foreign debt and the creation of a national fund of humanitarian assistance. But the most noteworthy measure is the compulsory contribution imposed on citizens who earn more than $500 a month, to be paid throughout the next 9 months.
These measures do not address the health crisis. They only work to comply with the demands of the International Monetary Fund, something that was interrupted last October. They propose tax and labor reforms that are even more radical than what the IMF demanded, because they want to remove all subsidies and benefit bankers.
These announcements were widely rejected by citizens across all sectors, while Ecuador's main workers' union continues to demand that authorities listen to their proposals.
It's time to stop paying our foreign debt. The state pays $12 billion a year, which could be used to help Ecuador overcome this crisis and to pay off the salaries of public workers, many of which remain unpaid. There were also recent revelations that 265 families have offshore accounts, so we need to tax them to generate income.
But the government says their economic plan seeks to protect the most vulnerable and to prevent layoffs.
This administration will establish agreements between all sides to protect businesses, and new salaries can be agreed upon, as well as different schedules. There can also be extensions of debt payments and of home ownership loans. The goal is to prevent layoffs.
But authorities from Quito's Chamber of Commerce say that there are other alternatives to confront the crisis, like reaching a consensus for a structural reform of the state in order to reduce spending.
Brazilian scientists estimate real coronavirus infection rates across the country could be 15 times higher than the government's official numbers. Our correspondent Brian Muir in Sao Paulo has more.
In the last 24-hour period recorded by the Brazilian National Health Ministry, 204 more people have died because of coronavirus. However, more and more academics and scientists are questioning these numbers. After the National Center for Health Intelligence Information released a study based on hospital records estimating that the real infection rate is 12 times higher than the numbers that the government is providing due to lack of testing. Another study was released by scientists from USP, the State University of Sao Paulo, and UNB, the Federal University of Brasilia, which also uses existing hospital records, which are updated daily, to estimate that up to 15 times higher number of people might be infected by coronavirus than the official rates. So this has been attributed to several factors. Lack of testing. Brazil has one of the lowest testing rates in the world, but also people are beginning to question whether the motives behind this are political, because far-right President Jair Bolsonaro is trying to end lockdowns, trying to end quarantines to please his backers in the international and national capitalist community who put profit above human lives.
We thank our correspondent Brian Muir for that report. Trinidad and Tobago continues to have the highest number of coronavirus cases in the Caribbean region, with one more person testing positive this Wednesday, taking the total to 114.
As of the 15th of the 4th, 2020, the clinical status update is as follows. 1,282 tests done so far, 114 positive persons, 8 deaths, with 19 discharges. We would have had 2 discharges that occurred last night, or yesterday and last night in Cora. The total number, leaving the total number of hospitalized patients between Cora and Govt 60.
In one day, Jamaica has recorded 32 confirmed COVID-19 cases, taking the nation's toll to more than 100. The number of fatalities remains at 5.
Jamaica can now confirm that we have 105 cases of COVID-19. This follows 32 new additions over the last 24 hours. The new cases comprise of 5 males and 27 females who range in ages from 19 to 70 years old. The cases are from St. Catherine, Kingston, and St. Andrew. They bring to 34 the number of cases under investigation. Of the remaining 71 confirmed cases, 31 are imported, 34 are contacts of a confirmed case, and 6 are local transmission.
Cuba has confirmed 48 new cases of COVID-19 in the island, putting the total number of cases to 814. Cuba's National Director of Epidemiology, Francisco Duran, said that 622 patients are in stable condition, 8 are in critical condition, and 151 patients have been discharged from hospitals. The country's death toll stands at 24. We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. More news now. Over half of Mexico's population is under quarantine, according to official figures. In Mexico City, while the presence of people on the streets has greatly diminished, public transport systems continue to operate.
26. Most social and economic activities in Mexico City have come to a halt when social distancing practices were put in place. The novel coronavirus pandemic has confined most people to their homes. Nonetheless, people like Julio Sanchez still head out on the streets looking to earn their living.
I am not worried about the virus. I am worried about my work because I have bills to pay. We don't even have money to fill up our gas tanks. Prices are through the roof.
Over 100,000 cab drivers operate in Mexico City. There are also 18,000 bus drivers who must guarantee the safety of their passengers.
I clean my unit every shift. I use chlorine and ammoniac to clean everything.
According to official data, the amount of people using public transport has decreased by over 60%. This becomes apparent in the city's metro system, which before the pandemic hit would service between 5 and 6 million people each day. Authorities have decreed that people need to wear face masks when using public transport.
Nobody is safe from infection. Young people think it doesn't matter or that they're safe, but they don't consider they could infect their families or others who may be in high-risk groups.
Mexico City's federal district is at the top of the list of confirmed COVID-19 cases in the country, thanks to a high population density.
Carlos Maciús, the special representative of the UN Secretary General to Colombia, presented his quarterly report to the Security Council on the implementation of the 2006 peace agreement. Maciús urged all parties to continue to uphold the agreements even in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic. He also called to adopt urgent protection measures for social leaders, human rights defenders, and former FARC combatants, reporting that the violence against them continues unabated despite the national lockdown due to COVID-19 spread. Since the issuance of the report, 3 more social leaders and 3 former combatants have been killed in Colombia, for a total of 195 former FARC combatants since the signing of the peace agreement.
I trust that this commitment will continue beyond the pandemic so that the efforts to bring peace and development in conflict-affected communities is strengthened and reinvigorated as a result of this crisis. I am certain that, through the constructive dialogue and dedicated efforts of the parties, public institutions, leaders at all levels, and of Colombian society more broadly, we can celebrate in the end the triumph of hope over fear, unity over division, and, as Garcia Marquez said, of life over death.
Are rising in Argentina about ongoing salary reductions in the service industry. Let's have a look.
In the middle of a countrywide quarantine and in direct opposition to measures imposed by the national government, a number large of fast food chains have reduced the salaries of their workers.
The truth is, these multinational companies have had record profits lately, but even so, they choose hurt workers. When profits are high, these are not shared with the workers. But when the goings get rough and there is a crisis going on, it's the workers who are made to pay. How are they supposed to go on during this time with even less money than before?
Social leader Celeste Fierro has warned that on top of these issues, this week a number of fast food places were reopened despite the quarantine.
How are these workers supposed to go back to work? What health guarantees are they receiving? Just before businesses shut down, workers weren't allowed to wear face masks. There was no disinfectant gel being provided, and we haven't seen anything that tells us conditions will be improved.
Social leaders say companies are taking advantage of the crisis to undermine labor rights.
Labor laws say that in prolonged closures caused by unforeseen catastrophes, like this current crisis, the company needs to pay workers a specific amount for the days they were unable to work.
Not only were these multinationals violating the decree signed by President Alberto Fernandez, but just days ago, the Tech Int group laid off 1,450 workers.
The COVID-19 crisis in Panama has been worsened by the deterioration of the health sector. Experts agree budget cuts and neoliberal measures have damaged the system's ability to contain the pandemic.
The city is calm as few people can be seen on the streets due to the curfew imposed by the government. Panama has surpassed 50 deaths due to COVID-19, with close to 2,000 infections. It faces this crisis with a damaged health system due to budget cuts.
The only things governments have tried to do is privatize our institutions, with a number of unpopular measures that have led us to what we're living through today. The health cabinet named by the president cannot resolve the ongoing issues due to the collapse of these institutions.
In 2019, the government cut the health system's budget by close to $420 million as part of their austerity plan, which affected a number of health institutions. By 2020, the budget was once again cut back by $289 million, including the budget of an institute that was responsible for identifying and isolating the strain of SARS-CoV-2 and of creating agents to aid in its detection.
They have compromised the state's capacity of facing the COVID-19 pandemic. If we have had any success combating it, has been thanks to the sacrifice of health workers, who, despite having had their budgets cut time and again, are leading the fight.
De los médicos, de las enfermeras, de los técnicos, investigadores.
The budget cuts have been condemned by social movements who say they are part of austerity plans imposed by the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, which also includes widespread privatization.
There's been a systematic privatization plan of the health system. Health workers are denouncing they lack supplies, in particular protective equipment.
Vemos las denuncias del personal de salud.
70% of Panamanians depend on the public health system. Experts agree that this crisis has uncovered the negligence of the state and the need for quality public health care.
As the novel coronavirus wreaks havoc across the globe, 2 African countries can boast of being COVID-19 free. Comoros and Lesotho have yet to confirm any cases of the virus as of this Tuesday. However, the 52 other nations across the continent have registered 16,000 patients. There have been 868 deaths, while 3,201 people have recovered. South Africa remains the country worst impacted with over 2,400 cases and 27 deaths. The International Monetary Fund is predicting that COVID-19 will force a 1.6% contraction of sub-Saharan African economies.
First, output in sub-Saharan Africa is expected to contract by 1.6% in 2020, and higher. In per capita terms, this will be higher still at close to 4%. The possibility that growth could be contract more still is quite high. And even if the contraction is limited to this level, it is worth noting that it represents a 5 percentage point downward revision since last October. And it is, as I noted, the worst performance that we've seen going back at least to 1970.
Palestinians have started to craft lanterns with their children amid the novel coronavirus lockdown in the Gaza Strip ahead of the holy month of Ramadan. So far, 13 COVID-19 cases have been recorded in the Palestinian enclave.
There is a lot of free time, so I taught my children how to make lanterns instead of going out on the streets and be exposed to infections. I taught them to make decorative lanterns for Ramadan.
Because of the coronavirus crisis in Gaza, all the children are stuck in their homes. They do not leave the house, and this leads to psychological and behavioral problems for children. So we thought about how can we occupy the children's spare time.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. More news now. Millions of people in India will be allowed back to work next week despite a nationwide coronavirus lockdown. Under the new guidelines to be implemented from April 20th, agriculture and related sectors, including farmers, markets, logistics, and repair shops, will be restarted. Some factories, such as manufacturing, will also be reopened, but staffing will be limited and working hours staggered. Factory owners are required to try and provide dormitories for workers or arrange special transport to and from the plants.
Most laborers have gone back to their villages. Now there's a shortage of workers, and the few who have stayed back are facing difficulties. The authorities don't allow them to enter the market area.
Workers are very afraid because they are not allowed to go anywhere. Vehicles are being stopped, and we are not receiving as many supplies. Only a few vegetables come into the market now, and even then, only half of them get sold. Customers are not coming because they are afraid of the police.
Medical services in Wuhan, China, which were once overwhelmed by the COVID-19 pandemic, are becoming available to other patients as the virus is now under tight control in the city. The entire medical team of Wuhan Orthopedic Hospital are back to work, ready to treat those suffering from bone and joint trauma. Safety remains one of the biggest concerns as hospitals across Wuhan resume outpatient services. So precautions have been taken to curb the spread of the coronavirus, and patients can get treatment only after showing their health QR codes and passing temperature checks.
When you're under the lockdown, you see no light at the end of the tunnel, and you don't know when it is going to end. But now, as the lockdown is lifted and everything is returning to normal, we have seen hope along with this process, which comes together with the advent of the spring. I think a victory over the coronavirus is ahead of us.
France's prime minister has announced that the government allocated nearly $120 billion in emergency funds to support the economy until May 11th, when the coronavirus lockdown will be eased. The prime minister also announced that the country's healthcare workers will receive a tax-free bonus of about $1,635, while families already receiving an income support will get an additional $163 per family and another $120 per child.
We have increased the emergency plan to a total of 110 billion euros. This is obviously a plan of an exceptional scale. The text presented today makes it possible. In particular, to significantly strengthen the emergency economic support mechanism. The financing of partial activity is increased to 24 billion euros, and the Solidarity Fund for very small businesses and the self-employed is increased to 7 billion euros.
The Tour de France has been pushed to start on August 29th instead of June 27th due to the coronavirus pandemic. The decision follows French President Emmanuel Macron's extension on Monday of a ban on public gathering until mid-July. The new dates are the latest ever for the world-famous bicycle race, which was founded in 1903 and attracts some 12 million spectators. Nurseries, kindergartens, and primary schools in Denmark have reopened after a month-long closure due to the COVID-19 pandemic, becoming the first European country to do so. However, classes are only resuming in about half of Denmark's municipalities and in about 35% of Copenhagen's schools, as others have requested more time to adjust to health protocols still in place. Schools are required to ensure a distance of 2 meters between desks in classrooms, and recesses must be organized for small groups. Some parents are against the decision, citing health concerns. A petition dubbed "My Child is Not a Guinea Pig" has garnered some 18,000 signatures. Turkey has released tens of thousands of prisoners to ease overcrowding in jails and protect detainees from the coronavirus. Those eligible under the new law will be released under judicial control until the end of May, and the Justice Ministry will be able to extend the period 3 times by a maximum of 2 months each time. The Justice Minister said there are 17 confirmed cases of COVID-19 among prisoners, including 3 deaths, and 79 prison personnel had also tested positive. The law has been criticized by opposition parties and activists for excluding those jailed on terrorism charges, which include journalists and politicians. Russian President Vladimir Putin has announced businesses will receive direct financial aid from the government to help them pay staff during the virus lockdown. Russia has compulsory non-working days until the end of April to slow the spread of the coronavirus.
I propose providing small and medium-sized companies in the affected sectors, and I would like to emphasize, this is in addition to the support measures already taken, direct, non-repayable financial aid from the state. The state-owned company, VEB, should guarantee no less than 75% of interest-free loans for companies in order to reduce risk to commercial banks, and will increase credit availability.
The Russian Investigative Committee have released a dramatic footage of the landing of a plane engulfed in flames at a Moscow airport in May of 2019. The footage only surfaced now because authorities completed the investigation and charged the plane's commander with a pilot error that killed 41 people out of the 78 on board. Just 28 minutes after takeoff, the plane of national airline Aeroflot returned to make an emergency landing while still heavy with unburned fuel, which then ignited after a rough touchdown. And with those images, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And be sure to follow us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Until next time.